Chapter 4. My mother teaches me bullfighting. We tore through the night down the dark country roads, wind slamming against the Camaro. Rain lashed the windshield. I didn't know how my mom could see anything, but she kept her foot on the gas. Every time there was a flash of lightning, I looked at Grover sitting next to me in the back seat and wondered if I'd gone insane or if he was wearing some kind of shag carpet pants. But no, the smell was one I remembered from a kindergarten field trip to the petting zoo. Smells like wool, the smell of wet barnyard animal. James, put it down. All I could think to say is, so you and my mom know each other? Grover's eyes flitted with the rear view mirror, though there were no cars behind us. Not exactly. I mean, we never really met in person, but she knew I was watching you. Watching me? Yeah, keeping tabs on you, making sure you were okay. But I wasn't faking being your friend. I am your friend. What are you exactly? It doesn't matter right now. It doesn't matter. From the waist down, my best friend is a donkey. Grover let out a sharp, throaty, ah! I'd heard him make the sound before, but I always assumed it was like a nervous laugh. Now I realized it was like an irritated bleat. Goat, he cried. What? I'm a goat from the waist down. You just said it didn't matter. Ah! There are satyrs who would trample you underneath for that insult. Whoa. Wait, satyrs, you mean like Mr. Bruner's myths? Were those old ladies at the fruit stand a myth, Percy? Was Mrs. Dodds a myth? So you admit there is a Mrs. Dodds? Of course. Then why? The less you knew, the fewer monsters you would attract. Grover said. That should be perfectly obvious. We put mist over humans' eyes. We hoped you'd think the kindly one was a hallucination, but it was no good. You started to realize who you are. Wait a minute, what do you mean? The weird bellowing noise rose up again somewhere behind us, closer than before. Whatever was chasing us was still on our trail. Percy, my mom said, there's too much to explain, not enough time. We have to get you to safety. Safety from what? Who's after me? Oh, nobody much, Grover said. Just the Lord of the Dead and a few of his bloodthirstiest minions. Grover! Sorry, Mrs. Jackson, could you drive faster, please? I tried to wrap my mind around what was happening, but I couldn't do it. I knew this wasn't a dream. I had no imagination. I could never dream up something this weird. My mom made a hard left. We swerved into a narrow road, racing past darkened farmhouses and wooded hills, and pick your own strawberries signs on white picket fences. Where are we going? The summer camp I told you about. My mom's voice was tight. She was trying for my sake not to be scared. The place your father wanted to send you. The place you didn't want me to go. Oh, please, dear. This is hard enough. Try to understand you're in such danger. Because some old ladies cut some yarn? Those weren't old ladies, Grover said. Those were the fates. Do you know what that means? The fact they appeared in front of you? They only do that when you're about to, when someone's about to die. Whoa, you said you. No, I didn't. I said someone. You meant you as in me. I meant you like someone, not you, not you. Boys, my mom said. She pulled the wheel hard to the right, and I got a glimpse of a figure she swerved to avoid. A dark, fluttering shape was now lost behind us in the storm. What was that? We're almost there, my mother said, ignoring my question. Another mile, please, please, please. I didn't know where there was, but I found myself leaning forward in the car, anticipating wanting to arrive. Outside, nothing but rain and darkness, the kind of empty countryside you get way out on the tip of Long Island. I thought about Mrs. Dodds in the moment when she changed into the thing with pointed teeth and leathery wings. My limbs went numb from delayed shock. She really had not been human. She really did mean to kill me. Then I thought of Mr. Bruner and the sword he threw at me. Before I could ask Grover about that, the hair rose on the back of my neck. There was a blinding flash, a jaw-rattling, and our car exploded. I remember feeling weightless, like I was being crushed, fried, and hosed down all at the same time. I peeled my forehead off the back of the driver's seat and said, ow, Percy! My mom shouted. I'm okay. I tried to shake off the daze. I wasn't dead. The car hadn't really exploded. We actually just swerved into a ditch. Our driver's side door was wedged in the mud. The roof had cracked open like an eggshell and rain was pouring in. Lightning. That was the only explanation. We'd been blasted right off the road. Next to me in the back seat was a big, motionless lump. Grover! He was slumped over, blood trickling from the side of his mouth. I shook his furry hip, thinking, no, even if you are a half barnyard animal, you're my best friend and I don't want you to die. Then he groaned. Food. And I knew there was hope. Percy, my mom said, we have to. Her voice faltered. I looked back. In a flash of lightning, there was mud-splattered rear windshield. I saw a figure lumping toward us on the shoulder of the road. The sight of it made my skin crawl. It was a dark silhouette of a huge guy, like a football player. He seemed to be holding a blanket over his head. His top half was bulky and fuzzy. His upraised hands made it look like he had horns. I swallowed hard. Who is Percy? My mom said. Get out of the car! My mother threw herself against the driver's side door. It was jammed shut in the mud. I tried mine, stuck too. I looked up desperately at the hole in the roof. It might have been an exit, but the edges were sizzling and smoking. Climb out the passenger side. Percy, you have to run. Do you see the big tree? What? Another flash of lightning. And through a smoking hole in the roof, I saw a tree she meant, a huge white house Christmas-looking tree, size pine at the nearest hill. That's the property line. Get over that hill and you'll see a big farmhouse down the valley. Run and don't look back. Yell for help. Don't stop until you get to the door. But Mom, you're coming too. Her face was pale, her eyes as sad as she looked in the ocean. No, I shouted, you're coming with me. Help me carry Grover. Grover moaned a little louder. The man with the blanket on his head kept coming toward us, making his grunting, snorting noise. As he got closer, I realized he couldn't be holding a blanket over his head because his hands, huge, meaty hands, were swinging on his sides. There was no blanket, meaning the bulky, fuzzy mass that was too big to be his head. That was his head. And the points that looked like horns? He doesn't want us, my mom said. He wants you. Besides, I can't cross the property line. But we don't have time, Percy. Go, please. I got mad then, mad at my mother, at Grover, at the goat, at the thing with horns that was lumbering toward us slowly and deliberately, like a bull. I climbed across Grover and pushed the door open in the rain. We're going together. Come on, Mom. I told you, Mom, I'm not leaving you. Help me with Grover. I didn't wait for the answer. I scrambled outside, dragging Grover from the car. He was surprisingly light, but I couldn't have carried him very far if my mom did not come to my help. Together, we draped Grover's arms over our shoulders and started stumbling uphill through wet, waist-high grass. Glancing back, I got my first clear look at the monster. He was 7 feet tall, easy as arms and legs like something from the cover of Muscle Man magazine. Bulging biceps and triceps and a bunch of other seps, all stuffed like baseball under vine-webbed skin. He wore no clothes except underwear. Table 4. I mean, bright white Fruit of the Looms underwear, which would have been funny except for the top of half of his body looking so scary. Coarse brown hair stared at this belly button and got thicker as it reached his shoulders. His neck was a mass of muscle and fur leading up to an enormous head, which had a snout as long as my arms, snotty nostrils, and gleaming brass ring, cruel black eyes, and horns, enormous black and white horns that we just couldn't get from an electric sharpener. I recognized the monster all right. He had been in one of the first stories Mr. Brunner told us, but he couldn't be real. I blinked the rain out of my eyes. That's Persephone's son. I wish I'd known how badly they want to kill you. But he's the man. Don't say his name. Names have power. The pine was still far away, 100 yards uphill at least. I glanced behind me. The bull man hunched over the car, looking in the windows, or not exactly looking, more like snuffling, muzzling. I wasn't sure why he bothered, since we were only 50 feet away. Grover moaned. Shh! I told him, Mom, what's he doing? Doesn't he see us? His sight and his hearing are terrible. He goes by smell, but he'll figure out where we are soon enough. As if on cue, the bull man bellowed. in rage. He picked up Gabe's Camaro by the torn roof. He raised the car over his head and threw it down the road. It slammed onto the wet asphalt and skidded in a shower of sparks for about half a mile before coming to a stop. The gas tank exploded. Not a scratch, I remember Gabe saying. Oops. Percy, my mom said. When he sees us, he'll charge. Wait until the last second and jump out of the way, directly sideways. He can't change directions well when he's charging. Do you understand? How do you know all this? I've been worried about an attack for a long time. I should have expected this. I was selfish, keeping you near me. Keeping me near you, but another bellow of rage, and the bull man started trembling uphill. He smelled us. The pine tree was a few more yards away, but the hill was getting steeper and thicker, and Grover wasn't getting any lighter. The bull man closed in. Another few seconds, and he'd be on top of us. My mother must have been exhausted, but she shouldered Grover. Go, Percy, separate. Remember what I said. I didn't want to split up, but I had the feeling she was right. It was our only chance. I sprinted to the left, turning, and saw the creature bearing down on me. His black eyes glowed with hate. He reeked like rotten meat. He lowered his head and charged, those razor-sharp horns aimed straight at my chest. The fear in my stomach made me want to bolt, but that wouldn't work. I could never outrun this thing, so I held my ground, and at the last moment, I jumped to the side. The bull man stormed past me like a freight train, then bellowed with frustration and turned, but not toward me this time, toward my mother, who was setting Grover down in the grass. We'd reached the crest of the hill. Down the other side, I could see a valley, just as my mother had said, and the lights of the farmhouse glowing yellow through the rain. But that was half a mile away. We'd never make it. The bull man grunted, pawing the ground. He kept eyeing my mother, who was now retreating slowly downhill, back toward the road, looking to lead the monster away from Grover. Run, Percy! I can't go any farther. Run! But I just stood there, frozen in fear, as the monster charged at her. She tried to sidestep, as she told me to do, but the monster had learned the lesson. His hand shot out and grabbed her by the neck as she tried to go away. He lifted her up as she struggled, kicking and pummeling in the air. Mom! She caught my eyes, managed to choke out one more word. Go! Then, with an angry roar, the monster closed his fist around my mother's neck, and she dissolved before my eyes, melting into light, a shimmering golden form, as if she were a holographic projection, a blinding flash, and she was simply gone. No! Anger replaced my fear. Newfound strength burned in my limbs, the same rush of energy I'd gotten when Mrs. Dodds grew talons. The bull man bore down on Grover, who lay helpless in the grass. The monster hunched over, sniffing my best friend, as if he were about to lift Grover up and make him dissolve too. I couldn't allow that. I stripped off my red rain jacket. Hey! I screamed. Hey, stupid ground beef! The monster turned toward me, shaking his meaty fist. I had an idea, a stupid idea, but better than no idea at all. I put my back in the big pine tree and waved my red jacket in front of the bull man, thinking I'd jump out of the way last minute. But it didn't happen like that. The bull man charged too fast. His arms got out and grabbed me, whichever way I tried to dodge. Time slowed down. My legs tensed. I couldn't jump sideways, so I leaped straight up, kicking off from the creature's head, using it as a springboard, turning in midair and landing on his neck. How did I do that? I didn't have time to figure it out. A millisecond later, the monster's head slammed into the tree, and the impact nearly knocked my teeth out. Bull man staggered around, trying to shake me. I locked my arms around his horns and kept him from being thrown. The thunder and lightning were still going strong. The rain was in my eyes. The smell of rotten meat burned my nostrils. The monster shook himself around and buckled like the rodeo bull. He should have just backed up into the tree and smashed me flat, but I was starting to realize this thing had only one gear, going forward. Meanwhile, Grover was still groaning in the grass. I wanted to yell at him to shut up, but the way I was getting tossed around, if I opened my mouth, I'd bite my tongue off. Grover moaned. The bull man wheeled around, pawed the ground again, and got ready to charge. I thought about how he had squeezed the life out of my mother, made her disappear in a flash of light, and rage filled me like high-octane fuel. I got both hands around one horn, and I pulled backward with all my might. The monster tensed, gave a surprised grunt, then snapped. The bull man screamed and flung me in the air. I landed flat on my back in the grass. My head smacked against a rock. When I sat up, my vision was blurry, but I had a horn in my hands, a ragged bone weapon the size of a knife. The monster charged. Without thinking, I rolled to one side and came up kneeling. As the monster barreled past, I drove the broken horn straight into his side, right up under his furry rib cage. The bullman roared in agony. He flailed, clawing at his chest, then began to disintegrate, not like my mother in a flash of golden light, like crumbling sand, blown away in chunks by the wind, the same way Mrs. Dodds burst apart. The monster was gone. The rain stopped. The storm still rumbled, but only in the distance. I smelled like livestock and my knees were shaking. My head felt like it was splitting open. I was weak and scared and trembling with grief. I'd just seen my mother vanish. I wanted to lie down and cry, but there was Grover needing my help, so I managed to haul him up and stagger down the valley toward the lights of the farmhouse. I was crying, calling for my mother, but I held on to Grover. I wasn't going to let him go. The last thing I remember is collapsing on a wooden porch, looking up at a ceiling fan circling above me, moss flying in the yellow light, in the stern faces of a familiar-looking bearded man and a pretty girl, her blonde hair curled like a princess. They both looked down at me and the girl said, "He's the one. He must be." "Silence, Annabeth," the man said. "He's still conscious. Bring him inside." End of chapter. So,